Is there a class war happening in Path of Exile? The elite 1% streamers, no-life gamers versus the poor working class exiles who can barely make it to endgame? Is there a war? I kinda don't think so. In this video I want to talk about why I think this narrative is not very helpful and also it's pretty bad for the community. Can even get toxic at times. But also why I think the disparity in playtime between the no-life full-on invested gamers, and also disparity in knowledge between the working class exiles, as we want to call them, the lifers and the no-lifers in PoE, is actually a huge problem and something that I think grinding gear games will have to address when improving Path of Exile and keeping this game up, especially when looking towards PoE 2, which will bring a ton of new players in, not all of which will be as invested and as knowledgeable of the game. So yeah, that's the plan for this video, and I'll start out with why I think this is a bad narrative. I think this is almost as toxic, or maybe even more toxic, than the whole old hardcore players versus softcore players debate argument, warfare, I don't know even what you want to call it, but the whole, oh, if you play hardcore you're an elitist, and if you play softcore you bear the game, and the whole, if you know life, you just want the game to be so hard I can play it, and the other side then is like, oh, you want to make the game casual, and I think that whole narrative is not good for the community, should freaking die, but I can definitely see where it's coming from, which is why I want to address the underlying important points that are actually the foundation why this narrative even exists. So that's what I want to get into. I think this whole narrative is not player versus player. It's not one player base versus the other player base part. PvP was never a thing in PoE, let's be real, so it's still not. It's still not a thing. Alright, it's not PvP. I think the narrative of no-lifers versus lifers, basically, let's call them, because if you call them hardcore players, then kind of like you have the problem with permadeath and core gamers. But you know, lifers versus no-lifers. If you have, I think there's like one big, huge false assumption, or maybe not false assumption. It's actually hard to tell if that is a false assumption, but there's one big underlying assumption why this narrative exists. And that assumption, the whole thing is based on, is if you make the game more accessible for the working class exiles and make it more approachable, make it so that with less time invested you can actually get to see most of the game and get a really decent decked out character, that would make the game basically not worth investing time into for the no-lifers, and would make it so that the game gets casualized, right? That the game is no longer targeted towards the core super invested player. And the other side of the argument is, or the other side is, that if you keep making the game challenging enough for no-lifers, it will never be accessible. It will basically be impossible to enjoy the game fully as a lifer, as someone with more IRL obligations, less playtime, less knowledge of the game, and so on. And yeah, the assumption is basically one side has to go. The game can only cater to one of the two, and I think it's really hard to tell if that's true or false. There are very few games who actually manage to cater towards both sides really well. If you know one, please leave a comment below and tell me, yeah, what you think is a game that really does that well, where you can play it as a lifer and as a no-lifer, and both times have incredible amounts of fun. So yeah, leave a comment, please let me know. I would be very interested how those balances are done, because that's like one of the biggest balancing issues I think PoE is facing in the upcoming like future, leading towards PoE 2 and beyond. Also subscribe if you're new to this channel. Path of Exile content coming out, discussions, memes, sometimes even builds, SSF by the way stuff, all that type of deals. So yeah, hit the subscribe button right now. Right now. Okay, thank you. Wasn't that hard, was it? Alright, where did I start? Where did I stop? The whole like selling out for the subscribe button, I'm not very used to that. Alright, yeah, so the underlying belief is one side has to go. It's either lifers or no lifers. And I think GGG believes, so this is like double speculation layers, I believe, GGG believes, that this is not true. And why do I think that? Well, if GGG wanted to balance the game for one side, balancing would be pretty easy. They just basically get rid of one side. And obviously from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense to get rid of a huge chunk of your player base, so they wouldn't want to do that. GGG is trying to balance the game, I think it's pretty obvious from their patches, in a way that is accessible for both sides of players, and that it is fun to play and a good time with that you can have with PoE if you play a few hours each day, or even like a few hours each week, and that you can also have a good time in PoE when you no-life it and still have enough stuff to do to play almost the whole league as a no-lifer. Because that's, of course, important for keeping streamers interested. So I think both sides are important to GGG, and I think they believe that both demographics are important to the game. I think that's what they mean when they always say like slow down the game. I think that's what they said that they want to do, which kind of sounds like they want to make the game more difficult, but to me it seems more like they're actually trying to avoid that term a bit because they don't want to make the game too inaccessible. And it's really hard to make a game that is accessible to many people and a broader audience while at the same time being catering to no-lifers. But why even do that? Like, aside from like not wanting to get rid of a part of the player base, I think PoE is a bit stuck in a bit of a dilemma where obviously catering to the majority of the players, which are the people who have less time, let's be real, the lifers outnumber the no-lifers, makes, at least at first glance, makes a lot of sense as a business decision. There are more players, there's the bigger player group, so yeah, let's go. Let's make the game super accessible for even the most casual of players. First of all, that would be a huge shift of direction of the game. PoE was had always the niche in the ARPG genre of it is the game that caters towards the more core audience. It caters towards the no-lifers. Like if Diablo 3 gets too boring for you after 2 weeks, PoE is there. That's the player that you get. There will also be more. That means there would also be more competition for them if they went a more casual route. Suddenly they're not competing with, I don't know, Volson or whatever, Last Epoch anymore. They're competing now with Torchlight and with Diablo. So it's a bit of a tricky decision. And the other thing, why it's maybe not as clear cut of a business decision, MTX amount of MTX money spent is more important economically, at least, to GGG than amount of players played. Obviously, amount of players played is super important as well. I think that's probably a bit of a hyperbole. I think both are important. But yeah, if like all the no-lifers are whales who spend thousands of dollars, euros, or whatever other currency units on the game, while the lifers who play a few hours basically spend nothing, that would mean, in theory, that both sides are like financially maybe even equally viable. Just like a bit of a thought. Also, Path of Exile has always been, yeah, as I said, has been made for the no-lifers, and it's been made big by the no-lifers. The people who play PoE since 1.0 and before that, a lot of no-life people who enjoy freaking hard games, who play PoE despite all the rough around the edges stuff that was still happening, all the desync and stuff. Those are the people who made the game big, and that's like where PoE comes from. And even though GG don't owe these people anything, I still think it would be pretty brutal to a lot of the long-standing audience of the game to just change direction, be like, yep, we're a casual game now, let's go. Torchlight remote. I think that would be pretty bad, and I think GGG wouldn't do that. Let's put it that way, because they are currently dialing the game back a bit from all the power creep that we had. But yeah, that of course sparked the whole debate because between lifers and no-lifers. However, there's also a demographic shift happening, because when I started the game, I was a no-lifer. I was a university student, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I played a lot of Path of Exile. That's how I got into the game, that's how I got into making videos, that's how I ended up actually full-time streaming for a while, that's what happened. But now, I'm a lifer. Now I'm a dad, I have a full-time job, I play some PoE, I still make videos, all thanks to the amazing support from my wife, who's amazing at enabling this stuff, and yeah, I'm super thankful for that. But yeah, I don't have that much time. I play a few hours per day maximum, and yeah, I'm still enjoying the game, but I have a distinct advantage. I have the knowledge from being a no-lifer. I'm a no-lifer turned lifer, which is a huge difference between that and coming freshly into the game. And I think that's where one of the core issues of the whole debate lies, and something they probably have to break down as well, because even if you manage to balance the game in a way that if you constantly play, like if you start at the same point and one person plays a lot and one person plays a little bit, of course the person playing a lot should have an advantage. You should get more out of the game, otherwise there's no incentive to play more. But there should still be enough enjoyable content, a lot of content accessible to the lifers, even also higher tiers of content and fun and crazy endgame boss fights, without investing crazy amounts of time. So I think it would be cool if they kind of managed that, and they've experimented with various ways to do that. Purely RNG boss encounters, splinters to like farm stuff up, progression systems like the Atlas and the Maven that actually are quite long. So I think that GGG will keep iterating on that, and they're definitely not there yet, because I think the current Atlas system makes it very hard with low investment to actually get into the super endgame. But you still see Conquerors early on, you can still get all the cool boss fights, except for, I think, the Maven encounter in the game fairly easily, even if you have a strong build at least, that I can do them. But you can see the content, you can see, you can get to Cirrus with a decent amount of time invested. However, I think the knowledge disconnect is way bigger, and way bigger of a problem. Because imagine that, I have a lot of knowledge because I used to be a no-lifer, right? So if now a PoE league comes out, I have to like learn, I have 1 league time to learn all the content of that one patch. So 3.14 now came out, and I have 1 league time to learn everything that was changed and new in this patch. And I managed to do that with like a few hours each day and a good base knowledge about the game. It's not a problem, I think. However, if I now started at 3.14, I would have to now learn everything about PoE. And learning would take me way longer. Like just trying to learn the content of this one patch would take me longer if I never played PoE before than it now does. And you also have the problem of just keeping up. Like I'm currently just keeping up in knowledge with PoE, but if you are new, you actually have to be catching up. And that's really difficult because on top of that 1 league, 1 patch of knowledge that you have to gain per patch to not fall behind, because if you only gain like half the knowledge per patch, you will actually fall behind, and like basically there will be more new content coming out than you will be able to learn. So you as a new player have to actually understand and learn more content per patch than 1 patch worth of content. So let's say I'm able to process information of 2 patches per 1 league that GGG puts out. Then it would still take me freaking years to actually get to the point where I know most stuff about PoE and actually understand the full game. And yeah, even if I process the information of 5 whole patches basically, or five whole league mechanics per league, it still takes me a really long time to learn the game. So I think that's one of the biggest issues currently that PoE has, and that's also why content bloat, which is always cited, is actually like a major systemic problem in my opinion, and more so than a gameplay problem, because a lot of people are like, oh, there's so much gameplay and mechanics and league content bloat in the game. There's like just so much to do. I feel like, oh, I want to delve, but I also want to heist, but I also want to map, but I also want to Maven progress, but I also want to progress my Conquerors. Where I'm gonna start? That's one problem. I think the content bloat problem is even more of an issue if you go from a new player perspective, or even a returning player's perspective. I saw a Hegemony come back to PoE after like a 3-year break, and he was overwhelmed. And he used to be, like, when he quit, he was one of the most knowledgeable players. He's been playing from the start. He's an OG Path of Exile player who knows a lot about the game, or knew a lot about the game when he quit. And even him coming back, he was like, betrayal board, what the hell? And it takes a long time to get into that, even as a returning player. And with Path of Exile 2, as I said, we will have a ton of returning and a ton of new players coming into PoE. And to not make this problem worse, they have to actually bring those two and consolidate those 2 worlds quite a bit without making the game worse for one of the 2 worlds, or one of the 2 player base types. Yeah, that's like the main issue we're looking at here. There's some other points that you kind of want to look into, because how long do people actually play the league, for example? Like, if most players only play the league for, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, or like between 4 and 8 weeks maybe, because I don't think the majority of people play the full 3 months. Then you actually look at a very even smaller time of like the knowledge barrier problem that I talked about earlier. So if someone only engages with PoE, let's say 4 weeks per league, he only has 4 weeks to learn more than 1 patch worth of stuff, right? And so it just keeps piling up at that point. So that's something you want to keep in mind. What do you want to balance your knowledge game base around, while still keeping the non-casual or the no-lifers engaged? Because a no-lifer, he'll probably figure out in like 2 to 3 weeks, figure out 90% of the patch's content. What's he gonna do the other 2 weeks? I mean, there's still a lot to do, but you also want like new, fresh stuff. I think the challenges are actually one of the best ways to engage no-lifers and like invested players, while not making the lifers feel like they're missing out, because the challenges first of all are very gradual. Like, you can do 12 challenges pretty easily. I think even as a very casual lifer, if you actually put yourself towards it, you can very much do 12, and I have no issue doing 24 challenges without even trying. But the 36 and the 40 out of 40 is something for like a really invested players. So that's like a way where you can engage the no-lifers without making the lifers feel like they're missing out fully. Like sometimes you will be a bit annoyed that you can't get the super cool MPX that is 36 challenges, but oftentimes you will be happy to get the 12 or the 24. So I feel like that it also feels optional. It feels very, very optional to do these challenges and these checklists. And of course, challenges are not for everyone. It's not the be-all, end-all solution, but it is one really good way that they currently have that they should definitely keep. And I would like the GGG to implement more things that feel more optional to do for the lifers, so the lifers don't feel like they're missing out. Like if there's an end boss, if there's Maven, if you never do the Maven fight in like 3, 4, 5 leagues while it's there, you feel like you're missing out. You've never seen the cool new endgame fight. And it's really hard to access that fight because it actually takes quite a bit of time to get to the Maven fight, right? You have to do several 10 boss invitations, get the splinters, and then do the fight. And the fight probably will take you more than one attempt to complete because it's a difficult fight. So I think that whole part, they can like maybe bring that gap a bit closer. How they do that, I think it's really, really difficult to do that. If I had the perfect solution on how to do that, I'd probably tell GGG and ask them for a big paycheck for that, because if I had the perfect solution to how to bring the lifers and the no-lifers together, that would be fantastic. I don't. GGG probably don't, but they're working on it, so that's pretty good. But yeah, I kind of wanted to draw attention to this issue a bit more, and also in a way that really shows, in my opinion, or hopefully really shows in this video, that it is not an issue that should divide the player base, because grinding gear games, in my opinion, are trying to consolidate both worlds and make it so that it actually works for both types of players. The game actually makes sense for both types of players to play, because that's the best business decision for them to make. Yeah, if you like the video, like the video. How about that? Thanks to our Patreon supporters. If you want to support the channel, feel free to do so. Link is below. I'm Yoji, and I will see you soon.